Noise Candy is the new six CD box set. Interesting story. This is, if it's best you tell me, it's stuff that you've recorded over the last 10 years.
It is. It's in a way, it's kind of leftovers, and I don't mean leftovers in a negative sense, because the material, I think, stands up very well. But it's material that was originally recorded for other projects but didn't fit on there, or just was recorded for its own sake and then forgotten about for a while. And towards the end of 1999, I decided it was time to sort of go through some shelves of tapes, and found all this stuff in different forms, and suddenly realised there was perhaps an album or two to be made from it. And as I started to assemble what seemed to be the best tracks, they started to take on more than one or two albums worth, and I ended up with 6 albums. In fact, they're 6 double-length albums, which is a bit extreme, but I couldn't really sort of restrain myself once I got started.
I was going to say, I worked out it's probably 9-10 hours of material on here, isn't there?
I would think so. I must have timed it at one time, but I can't remember exactly now.
Yeah, you must have a very high quality threshold, Nick, because a lot of this doesn't. I know you said it's not second rate stuff, but it's stuff that could have easily made the proper albums. They're not offcuts at all, are they?
No. I mean, the thing I find fascinating about this is that when I came back to the material, and I realised obviously that some of the pieces were destined for other projects that had already been released perhaps 5 years more previously, and so on. I started to think I'd made the wrong decisions, and that the ones that I put on the other projects perhaps should have been the offcuts, and these should have been the main ones. So it proved a point that when you're on top of something, sometimes you need to be able to sit back and make a later judgment as to what's the best and what isn't. And a lot of the snap decisions that I'd made originally might not have been the right ones.
And they sound remarkably fresh as well. You say some of them date back to 91. They sound like they were recorded 6-10 days ago, not 12 years ago, don't they?
Well, I hope so. One of the things that is quite flattering, and it's difficult for me to judge how true it is or how accurate it is, but people do say that the material does have a longevity, and even some of the things that I recorded in the 70s, the Bebop Deluxe period stuff, some of that still sounds fresh now, and I don't know why that should be, because it's not something that I have in the forefront of my mind when I sit down to write a piece of music. I have to write something that's going to last a long time. I write whatever is on my mind at that moment, and those whims that take a composer at those moments can be very sort of nebulous and ephemeral. But people do tell me that they can live with it for quite a long time, so that's fine by me.
So are these? Have you had to touch them up a bit, or they literally as you found them? Because they are finished tracks.
No, they're exactly as they were, simply because they were recorded on my old analog reel-to-reel tape system, and because I was a cheapskate, I never used to buy new reels of tape, so I just wiped the master. The multi-track tapes would get wiped as I do a new piece. I would wipe whatever was on that tape and use the reel over and over again. And so the multi-tracks don't exist. There are no multi-tracks. All I had was the mixes that I'd done at the time. And the mixes, obviously, you can't get into and change around. You're stuck with the way they sound. So apart from just doing the usual mastering process at the end of the day on each CD, once the running order was assembled, they weren't tampered with in any way at all.
So how have you themed the 6 discs? Because you haven't just started at 91 and worked to the present day, have you? It's kind of, you've actually put them in 6 themes. They've all got 6 separate titles, so in the way they are separate albums. It's not just a simple box set. Yeah,
well, initially that wasn't the plan. I just suddenly realised there was a lot of material that was worth hearing, and I should try and use it in some way. And then as I started making a short list, it became a medium list and then a long list. And certain things started to emerge, that there were a group of tracks that would sound nice together, and they had a sort of a general theme, if you like, or vibe about them. And eventually I got a framework for the 6 albums, and was able then to look at the list and put things into these 6 albums almost as if there were 6 separate categories. And one of the albums has a very sort of bizarre take on, well, not bizarre, but a sort of a left field take on country music, which is something I hadn't done before. One has a more obvious kind of a rock guitar approach. One has an instrumental ambient type of feel. One has a jazzy bluesy groove kind of feel to it. Another is pure pop, and the other one is something that seems to be a collection of everything that didn't fit into the other categories. So it did suddenly take a shape, of its own accord, really.
So looking through your career, there's so much stuff out there. You must make, and you're just constantly recording and writing, or is it a daily trip down to the home studio and a couple of hours and just experiment?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is it's worrying really, because it can be seen as obsessive and rather sort of unhealthy, and I'm sure it is unhealthy and obsessive at times. But it is a daily thing. I enjoy doing it. That's really the main reason why I do it. I just derive a lot of pleasure from making music, and obviously if you're doing it every day and it's day long, apart from weekends when I try and sort of have some kind of social life, you do amass an awful lot of material. And particularly with the old analog system that I used to use, it's a very quick and easy way of recording. There isn't so much technology in the way, so things can go down quickly and easily as if it was a sketchbook almost. And I used to treat tape in that way. It would be a sketch pad for ideas that often I'd tell myself that this is an idea I will finish later and I will work up into something that's more polished. But then you move on to the next piece, and before you know it, you've amassed a stack of ideas which you intended to go back to and finish off, and yet they've suddenly achieved an identity in the form they are. You become used to hearing them that way, and to do anything more to them would seem wrong, so they end up taking on their own life.
Very much like this project, you've never been a man who's afraid to put out the stuff if you feel you haven't been able to complete it, but work in progress as well. You've been able to let the listening public hear all different works in different forms.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
From like demos to work that I haven't been able to finish this, but to the real polished stuff.
Yeah, I think if it's interesting enough to me, obviously I wouldn't let things go out that I thought were really substandard or reflected badly upon me in any way. Gosh, I mean, it sounds kind of wrong in a way saying that, but anyway, if I think the criteria is that it's honest and it interests me, and if it's not particularly well polished or absolutely refined, that's kind of not even secondary. It's somewhere down the list of priorities. The main thing is that it says something that means something to me and reflects something back, and has a point of interest. And I think it's worth having that approach. I mean, there's we get so used to hearing supremely disciplined and technical recordings and works and all the rest of it. We are used to seeing everything kind of hyped up to the 9th degree, but the sketchbook is just as interesting as the finished painting sometimes.
Not with just the music, you're actually very heavily involved in the packaging. That's something that's struck me over the years. You've been very not just happy to give it to a record company, but every bit of it you like to make sure is 100% and correct, with the artwork, the liner notes, which you've always given it in-depth liner notes. You like to be involved in every part.
I think that's probably partly my art school background. I did originally plan to be involved professionally in some kind of form of visual art. At the bottom line, that would have been teaching. But I think many of us at art college at the time dreamt of becoming successful painters. But music took over, and it became my career. But the visual sense is still there, and is very sort of important to me. So I've always had a hand in the design and the look of things, and I'm pretty fussy about things being right, you know, and that can be a bit frustrating for some of the people I have to work with, because they're not used to musicians having such a large say in the visual sense. But unfortunately, that's the way I am. I can't really sort of do much about that.
You're very much, looking at your artwork over the years, very much a fan of kind of 30s, 40s sci-fi and kind of images from the 30s, 40s, and like the Dan Dare kind of cartoons, that kind of thing. What is it appeals to you about that?
Well, I was born in 1948, which makes me a very old person indeed now, but I grew up in that sort of post-war retro-future era, where technology was seen as benevolent at that time, to a great degree, even though, you know, obviously there'd been the horrors of Hiroshima and so on. But particularly as a young boy, the kind of science fiction that I was exposed to, obviously things like Dan Dare, and some of the American science fiction, Flash Gordon, Buck Rogers. And now, looking back on that, it's easy to see that it was very naive and it was very utopian. And it's an antique kind of futurism that has lots of ornamentation and quirkiness about it. It's kind of sweet. And in view of the dangers that we are now exposed to via all kinds of technology, whether it be out there in the worlds of war, or in terms of warfare, or whether it be something that's more insidious, like the kind of things that invade our homes via television and computers. Now, looking back at that more innocent time, it becomes a kind of a sanctuary in a way. You know, it's a reminder that innocence still has its place, and I kind of hang on to it in a way, because it does remind me of where I've come from, and it does remind me that a child's view can be full of wonder and full of optimism, whereas I think it's very difficult sometimes for younger people now. They're so well informed of what's going on out there in the real world, and so they should be in a way, but the world is such a sort of a fragmented and yet, you know, unified, because we're aware of things happening on the other side of the globe. All these things make such an impact on young people, and it must be very hard to sort of maintain a real optimism, you know, about things. So this, for me, is a reminder that there is some innocence still to be thankful for, I think.
I know what you mean. We kind of have the dirty look of Blade Runner and all that kind of images that now kind of dominate sci-fi, but you look at that and it has that kind of very, as you say, clean kind of good feel about what the future could be. Yes. From a very young age. Talking about technology, you've very much involved yourself with the internet, because the website, you have your the fan website, but there's a lot, you've used that quite well to your music, to distribute it around. You're not one of these artists who's not afraid to put their music on the web, are you?
Not particularly, no. I mean, I am sort of wary of some of the exploitation that happens, because it's difficult, because I can see two sides to the argument. You know, a lot of music fans say, well, why shouldn't artists make certain things available for free downloads, and it helps to spread the word about their work, and it helps people to at least have a little insight into what they're doing, and perhaps then go out and buy an album later on. And also they say, you know, these people earn lots of money, the record companies make lots of money, why shouldn't we have some freebies? But whilst that might work well for an artist who's well established, an Elton John or a Paul McCartney or whatever, a household name who's, you know, very wealthy and comfortable and successful, for the independent artist who is working on the borderline of being able to survive, if you like, financially from making music, those infringements actually are quite dangerous. You know, when there are illicit downloads going on, where people are copying CDs and passing them around instead. It's always been done with cassettes before, so it's not so new, but it can be worrying for the smaller people. So I can see both sides of the coin, but I do think that the communication that the internet offers between artist and his audience, that direct communication, is very, very important, and it's very new. relatively new anyway, and it does cut out a lot of middlemen, and it's the middlemen that are most frightened by this. It's the record companies in between, and that whole infrastructure that maintains the music business in the way that it has been for so many years, where the power is really vested in the corporate identity, and the artists are of in a way lesser importance, although without them the whole thing collapses. But the internet allows the artist to directly deal with his audience and to receive feedback from the audience too. And in that respect, I think it's a very, very good thing.
You've got a very loyal and hardcore fan base as well, haven't you? Reading, as I had a look on the site today before I came, you're very open with them. You have a very open diary. It's a diary I probably wouldn't publish. It's a very heartfelt. You reflect things in the news, what's happening in your own life, and it's like you actually feel like you're part of the family. Do you feel that's very important?
Well, the diary is. I guess it maybe seem to someone on the outside that it is fairly sort of raw and open, but there's a lot, I can assure you, doesn't find its way into there. I do keep some things private, but I think it's a good way for people don't have an insight into how a musician or a musical writer works, how they conduct their lives on a daily basis. There's a lot of illusion, there's a lot of fantasy presented, particularly from the point of view of the mainstream record industry. I mean, the notion of stardom and of celebrity is something that's concerned me for a long time, and I had a bit of a taste of that obviously back in the 70s when I had Bebop Deluxe, because we were part of that particular machine for a while. And when I was younger, it was exciting and so on, but there was always that thing of feeling a little dishonest about the way we were presented, What the internet has allowed me to do and what the diaries allowed me to do is really sort of show people that it's not to get rid of any sense of specialness about it, because I think, people who make music, they have. I mean, this is a very, very tricky thing, because it starts to get into, when we're talking about specialness, are we talking about somebody who's better than somebody else or not? And I don't mean in that sense, but I mean in that a creative person works in a particular mindset all the time. It works from a slightly different angle from, say, the way I worked when I worked in my office job working for local government back in the early 70s. The things that concern me on a daily basis are totally different from the things that concerned me then. The things that concern me now on a daily basis aren't necessarily healthy. It doesn't mean I've got a good grip on the real world. It means I've got a good grip on my musical world, but my musical world is very sort of closeted. And some of these problems, if you like, interest me. The way that artists balance their creative life with their everyday social and family life and so on. And I think that hopefully the diary shows some of these things at work, and some of the kind of paradoxes and the complex things that go on in the mind of someone who's desperately trying to sort of keep ends together and yet follow this rather sort of obsessive urge to make music and not alienate friends and family and indeed the world at large around him by being so self-centered and into that particular act of creativity. It's quite possible that many artists don't even bother to think about it this way. It's just something that they get on with and do, but it does trouble me and has done for a while. So I think the diary is interesting reading because of that.
One of the other, to tie in with the album, even though you're not playing, as I gather stuff from it, you're playing live for the second time in London this year, but it's been a long gap since we've seen you on stage.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last time I played London was in 1998. And that was at the Queen Elizabeth Hall. I did 2 nights as part of a thing called the Festival of Drifting on the South Bank there. And prior to that, it would be with Channel Light Vessel, which was probably a couple of years before that. So yeah, it's been a while since I played London. And the Jazz Cafe concert on Sunday is purely instrumental. and I'm using some pre-recorded tapes to form part of the musical backdrop. But it's basically live guitar and live marimbas improvised on top of pieces of music I've made in my home studio, and bringing in other people as well to work with me, improvise with me. So some pieces will have my brother Ian playing saxophone on, some will have Kate St. John playing saxophone and oboe on, some will have a keyboard player called Steve Cook playing with me, and some will have a bass player called Ian Lease playing with me, and some will have different combinations of those people. In fact, one has us all on, two pieces actually have us all playing on. So it should be a fairly interesting evening, because there are all these different combinations, and everything that happens on top, whilst we've had sort of rehearsals, they're very much the rehearsals are designed to familiarise ourselves with the backing tracks rather than familiarise ourselves too much with what we might do live on the day. The thing that we add on the day, the live component, is very much sort of in a state of flux all the time, and it can be kind of dancing on the edge, if you know what I mean. It can be a little bit hair-raising, so hopefully it's going to be quite exciting.
Do you miss playing live?
I do when I've finished a concert. I always go away saying, I must do more of these. I really enjoyed that. That was great. But then months or a year or two will go by and somebody says, it's time we did another concert. Why don't we fix one up here? And then I start to panic, and then I get in a really terrible state and get very anxious, and I wish I'd stayed at home in my studio where I'm safe and I know exactly what's happening. But I'm sure after it's all finished on Sunday, I'll be wanting to do it again.
So what's next? The box set's out. New material. Is there plans for a single album?
There is, yeah. Well, it's a double. I mean, a single? You're joking. No, it's a double album called Whimsy, coming out hopefully early next year, perhaps February if I get the artwork finished. That's all it's waiting for. It's all mastered. It just needs the artwork. And
what can we expect on that?
It's an album of, so people tell me, very accessible, almost pop songs. I don't know what that quite means in my world, but that's what I've been told. And it's the first set of recordings I've made at home on my digital studio system. So really the pieces were put together to give me something to work with, so I could learn how to use this new digital recording system that I installed a couple of years ago. And at the end of it, I had again, 2 albums worth of songs, which hadn't originally started out as being pieces for release. They were pieces to rehearse with this new equipment, but they ended up being worthwhile music, hopefully. And so a double album will be appearing of those, and I'm already on with the follow-up to that, which is a guitar instrumental album, which is kind of introvert and that ambient word again, which seems such a cliche to use now, but sort of expansive music, but with the guitar being the focal point rather than keyboard.
Do you prefer to work on your own? Because a lot of this work is literally stuff you've done on your own, multi-tracked. Do you miss having people around to bounce off, or do you find yourself actually one who works better on his own?
Well, when I worked in a band on a regular basis, I used to sort of love those moments when I could go and do something on my own. But for the last 20 odd years I've been working alone, and it gets lonely working alone. I'm looking forward to, we're hoping to be able to fund an album in an outside studio next year, not in my little room at home, with various musicians working with me, and I think that would be kind of a nice exciting thing for me to do now, because I really feel that it's time to sort of open up and let other people put some ideas in as well, just for a while anyway, and then I'll go back to doing it on my own, I'm sure, but we'll see what happens next year. You've
been since 1971 Northern Dream, if I remember. It's over 30 years you've made a career out being a musician. It's been a mixture. You've been a rock star in a band, you've had the solo career, and now you've quite happily settled in doing what you've wanted to do. And has it been a joy?
Oh, absolutely. And anyone who sort of knows me closely or has followed the career closely will know that there've been times when it's been a nightmare as well. I've had a lot of sort of problems as a result of all kinds of business, the usual music business things that happen. It's not just me, it happens to lots of people. But I've had a few problems anyway, and yet, despite that, I wouldn't have changed a thing, you know. I mean, I really consider myself extremely fortunate to be able to make the music that I want to make, and still be doing that after such a long period of time. I mean, there are many artists who have had more commercial success than I've experienced, and whose careers have lasted a few short years, you know, and then they're back doing whatever they did before, and you know, thank God I'm still doing the thing I love most. So I'm lucky, I'm very lucky.
Great stuff, thank you.
Thank you.